Greetings to all, and brace yourselves for another chilling episode of Good Story. In this video, we're going to delve into two narratives that, in my view, stand out as some of the most captivating and heartbreaking tales ever presented on the channel. The second story, in particular, is so astonishing that I found myself compelled to discard the others I had initially intended to include, as they seemed utterly eclipsed by it. Regardless, I truly hope you share my sentiments and, as always, proceed with caution. Bruce Bairn's father cowered in the icy depths of his trench on Christmas Eve 1914, surrounded by a scene devoid of any holiday spirit. The trench was a mere 3-foot or 1 metre deep gash in the mud of Belgium, suffocated by stale air and the lingering scent of damp cigarettes. His uniform was rigid with the same mud, his boots were drenched, and he clutched his rifle more out of instinct than any pressing need. By then, the war had settled into a bleak stalemate, and this night was like any other, frigid, wretched, and shadowed by the constant menace of gunfire. As he trembled in the darkness, Bruce suddenly perceived something unsettling. The noise crept across the desolate expanse of no man's land, faint at first, almost lost in the howling wind. Bruce then lifted his head, listening intently, and soon it became undeniable. The Germans were actually singing a song. The words felt utterly alien, yet the melody echoed the haunting familiarity of Still Nacht, or Silent Night. Bruce then turned to a fellow soldier, his eyes wide with disbelief, and asked if he too had heard the haunting voices. The man nodded, his expression grim, revealing that the Germans had been at it for some time now. In that chilling instant, the war appeared to come to a haunting standstill. Then, in a chilling response to the eerie melody, a British voice hesitantly emerged from another trench. Another emerged after that, and soon Silent Night reverberated in 2 languages across the battlefield, a haunting reminder of the chaos surrounding them. Lanterns emerged along the enemy lines, their flickering light casting eerie shadows in the darkness, while small Christmas trees were ominously raised above the trenches. Then, a voice emerged from the German side in English, powerful and unmistakable despite a thick accent, urging the British to approach the other side. This invitation was met with a sense of dread and disbelief. Could this be a sinister ploy, or were the Germans attempting to ensnare the British in a deadly trap? But Bruce then watched in dread as figures moved in the darkness, cautiously climbing out of their trenches and stepping onto no man's land. He then held his breath, anticipating the chilling crack of gunfire, but it never arrived. Instead, he encountered something utterly shocking. It was the onset of an experience that was nothing short of terrifying, a moment that would challenge the nightmarish reality of war, if only fleetingly. In the winter of 1914, on the Western Front in World War I, a conflict that many had anticipated would conclude swiftly had instead spiraled into a nightmarish cycle of relentless struggle. Dreams of returning home for Christmas had withered away, overshadowed by the harsh and unforgiving truth of trench warfare. Just a few months into the conflict, the war was rapidly spiraling into one of the most gruesome chapters in human history. By December, the Western Front loomed as a nearly unbroken line from the North Sea to the Swiss border. Soldiers endured a nightmarish existence in these crude trenches, hewn from the unforgiving frozen earth, their lives overshadowed by the relentless menace of artillery shells, sniper fire, and the ever-present spectre of disease. The trenches were a nightmare, foul and infested, filled with stagnant water that transformed the ground into a treacherous quagmire. Rats infested the dugouts, ravenously consuming discarded scraps and, at times, the unburied remains. And trench foot, a horrifying skin condition caused by prolonged exposure to wet conditions, also crippled many of the men. The space between the enemy trenches was a desolate expanse filled with twisted barbed wire and the remnants of lost lives, a haunting reminder of the horrors of war. Amidst the relentless hostility, there were moments when soldiers, compelled by a profound sense of shared suffering, forged a silent pact to refrain from needless slaughter. This mutual understanding, chillingly referred to as live and let live, sometimes permitted men on both sides to retrieve their fallen comrades or mend their fortifications, all while lurking under the constant threat of being shot at any moment. Then, as Christmas approached, despite the relentless grip of war, the holidays awakened a haunting sense of longing within the men. Many of them had grown up with Christmas traditions that included songs, feasts, and the unsettling chill of family gatherings. But now instead, they found themselves trembling in the dark, torn away from their loved ones by an insurmountable distance. Back in Germany, Kaiser Wilhelm II sought to uplift spirits by dispatching small Christmas trees to the front. In a shocking turn of events, some of the German soldiers then placed these atop their trenches. This seemingly ordinary act would soon unleash a chain of events that would shockingly alter the course of the war in ways never before imagined. On that Christmas Eve, as Bruce and his comrades continued to listen to the haunting singing of German troops, they heard that chilling German accent in English beckoning them to cross. After a long, tense silence, one of their own finally spoke. "You come halfway, I'll come halfway." And then, to my utter disbelief, they did. German troops advanced toward the trenches with an unsettling slowness, their hands raised in a desperate attempt to convey their lack of weaponry, a tense atmosphere hanging heavily in the air. Several British soldiers, trembling with dread, cautiously emerged from their icy dugouts. That moment must have felt like an endless nightmare as they took slow, hesitant steps toward the heart of desolation. Because once more, this was a location that until that moment had been the most savage part of an already nightmarish conflict. But on that night, it transformed into something utterly unsettling. It transformed into a chilling gathering for men who, for fleeting instants, glimpsed one another not as adversaries, but as fellow human beings. There were no commanders present, nor any orders to obey. Only men driven by instinct, irresistibly pulled toward an unimaginable truce by a force far beyond the chaos of war. Some shook hands with a sense of dread, some laughed in disbelief, while others exchanged weary nods, their faces pale with shock. From their pockets, the soldiers then pulled out whatever gifts they could, including cigarettes, chocolate biscuits, and small tokens that were exchanged as if they were friends rather than sworn enemies, creating an unsettling contrast in the midst of conflict. A few men even shared photographs of their families, pointing to these smiling faces that felt disturbingly distant. Others exchanged uneasy pats on the back, murmuring fragmented words in broken German or English, as if trying to mask an underlying tension. As the first light of Christmas morning crept over the battlefield, an eerie silence was shattered when someone produced a soccer ball. From an unknown origin, a chilling transformation occurred. Boots, once designed for the grim tasks of marching and trench digging, now found themselves violently propelling a ball across the desolate battlefield. In his diary, a German lieutenant later wrote about the shocking reality that Christmas, a celebration of love, managed to bring mortal enemies together as friends for a time. Other diaries and letters home recounted the unsettling scene of a British soldier, once a barber, establishing a makeshift barber shop in the desolate expanse of no man's land, providing haircuts to German soldiers in return for a few cigarettes. As unsettling and haunting as this was, though, not every moment that Christmas was shrouded in joy across the Western Front. For some, the truce was a chilling occasion. Many of the deceased, whom the soldiers were forced to abandon in their final resting places, were ultimately granted a burial. British and German soldiers joined forces to bear the weight of their fallen comrades, murmuring prayers over the lifeless bodies before laying them to rest beneath the cold earth. For those who had lost close friends in the battle, the moment was suffocating with despair. This shocking event would carry on through Christmas Day, but sadly, the violence would resume once more. And the truce was far from universal. The British-controlled Western Front extended ominously for 30 miles, and in certain regions, the relentless war showed no signs of abating. Several soldiers who ventured into no man's land that night met a fate from which there was no return. And then by the time December 26th arrived, the delicate calm that had briefly enveloped the trenches started to disintegrate. The men who had exchanged handshakes in no man's land just the day before now stood once again in the muck, gazing at the enemy with whom they had shared cigarettes and laughter mere hours ago. Orders from high command had started to spread, a chilling reminder that the war was not to be halted, not even for Christmas. And while certain areas of the Western Front experienced a temporary pause that stretched into New Year's Day, in the majority of locations, the conflict raged on relentlessly. Officers, deeply unsettled by the unexpected truce, swiftly re-established their dominance. For instance, British General Sir Horace Smith-Dorrien issued orders prohibiting any further fraternization, anxious that such gestures of goodwill might undermine the men's resolve to fight. German commanders ominously ordered their troops to return to their positions, bracing for the impending chaos of renewed combat. And the message afterward was unmistakable. This war was far from finished, and the haunting silence would replace any semblance of song across the trenches. As you might imagine, for some soldiers, picking up their rifles again felt utterly unsettling after what had just transpired. The men who had clinked bottles and played soccer together paused in dread as they returned to their posts, filled with an unsettling reluctance to unleash their weapons upon those they had briefly known as allies. Some units even officially adopted a policy of coexistence, holding back from needless hostility for as long as they could. Yet in most areas, the conflict erupted again with overwhelming intensity. For top military officials, the Christmas truce was a shocking development, and one that could not be allowed to happen again. In the years that followed, measures were implemented to guarantee that a moment of tranquility like that would never happen again. The winter of 1915 brought with it a chilling atmosphere of strict enforcement, ominous warnings against any form of camaraderie, and a looming sense of dread as soldiers faced harsh punishments for even the slightest attempt to revive the truce. Propaganda served to strip away the humanity of the enemy, constantly reinforcing to soldiers that their obligation was to battle, not to forge any connections with those opposing them. After 1914, the hope for widespread Christmas truces vanished, leaving a chilling silence in its wake. Yet, in spite of the relentless attempts by military leaders to erase the haunting memory of the truce, it persisted, echoing through the letters and diaries of those who had endured it. Accounts of the extraordinary event made their way home, where families read in disbelief about the fleeting peace amidst the devastation. It stands as a chilling reminder of the humanity that can emerge even amidst the bleakest circumstances, highlighting that, fundamentally, war is waged by individuals who share more similarities than differences. It was a beautiful spring day in May of 1979, as an American Airlines aircraft was preparing for takeoff, but an unsettling tension hung in the air. The sun glared off the plane, creating a blinding spectacle that was nearly unbearable to behold from the precise angle, while David Booth stood beside a one-story yellow brick building, his gaze fixed with unsettling intensity. David watched in disbelief as it sped away from him before lifting off the ground for what seemed like a flawless takeoff, but an unsettling feeling gnawed at him. There was something deeply unsettling about the sound the plane was making. Initially, it was understated, but it quickly became something that could not be overlooked. Then suddenly, the plane's right wing lifted, and the aircraft tilted as it fought to ascend, rolling at such a terrifying angle that it seemed on the verge of flying upside down. Then, in a terrifying instant, the nose of the plane plunged downward, hurtling toward the earth. David's heart raced uncontrollably as he stood paralyzed, witnessing the horrifying reality unfold before him. Then came the dreadful impact. The thunderous blast and the ensuing inferno were beyond anything he had ever witnessed. The impact reverberated through the earth, crashing into his chest with a ferocity that was impossible to ignore. The searing heat enveloped him, while the acrid stench of burning fuel permeated the air, creating an atmosphere thick with dread. In a chilling moment, screams reverberated through the inferno, and for an instant, David felt as though he were trapped inside the plane. Then, in the next second, he gasped, jolting upright in bed, drenched in sweat, as a chilling dread enveloped him. His chest heaved as he gasped for air, his mind trapped in the haunting memories of the smouldering ruins. Then the plane disappeared, and the explosion was erased from existence. He found himself isolated in his bedroom, gazing into the abyss of darkness, and fortunately, it had merely been a dream. Yet the dread lingered, as if it were all too real. The vision was disturbingly vivid and alarmingly precise. Every detail was seared into his memory, as if he had genuinely stood at the precipice of the runway, witnessing the catastrophe unfold before his eyes. He then compelled himself to lie back down, yet sleep eluded him completely. No matter what David did that day, the haunting dream clung to his mind, and even though he was utterly drained from lack of sleep, the weariness paled in comparison to the dread that consumed him. He had never experienced a dream like it before, and as night time approached, a deep sense of dread enveloped him. But at some point, his exhaustion became unbearable, and he succumbed to sleep, only to be jolted awake in the dead of night, drenched and gripped by sheer terror from the same haunting vision. This occurred once more the following night, and then again after that. For 10 consecutive nights, the terrifying premonition played on repeat, embedding itself into his consciousness, and with each passing day, the overwhelming dread intensified. He attempted to dismiss it, convincing himself that it was merely a figment of his imagination, yet it felt as though the instant his head touched the pillow, the terror would resurface. Now, David was not a man easily swayed by irrational fears. He was eerily quiet, disturbingly rational, and by all accounts, unsettlingly ordinary. He had endured a mundane existence as a married man, struggling to raise a family while toiling in the rental car business in Ohio. Everything began with that initial unsettling dream in the early morning hours of May 16, 1979, but it soon became evident that there was nothing coincidental about it. Every night, the same dread-filled sequence unfolded in his dreams. The bright sunlit day, the long runway, the massive American Airlines jet taxing for takeoff, an unsettling shift in sound, a disturbing tilt, a horrifying roll, and then an explosion. Then, after that, David jolted awake in terror each time, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the dream was hiding something sinister beneath its surface. It felt like a dire omen, and a chilling urgency began to swell within him, as if he was destined to intervene or prevent something dreadful from unfolding. But how could he possibly put an end to such a terrifying nightmare? On May the 22nd, after enduring 7 nights of relentless dread, David finally sought assistance. He stood frozen, the phone looming before him, grappling with the chilling thought that perhaps no one would care to hear his voice. But he did eventually dial the number, and to his shock, he found himself speaking with the Cincinnati office of the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA. A man named Paul Williams answered, and David began to recount his dream, a sense of dread creeping over him as the words tumbled out, each one amplifying his embarrassment. In a shocking turn of events, Paul neither laughed nor hung up, nor did he outright dismiss David. Instead, he posed unsettling questions such as, what kind of plane was it, and what did it look like? David clearly lacked any expertise in aviation, having little knowledge about airplanes, and could only inform Paul that it was an American Airlines plane. Paul then pressed him further, and after a tense discussion they concluded that it was likely a DC-10. This is a plane with 3 engines, one of which is mounted ominously on the tail. David then also spoke to Jack Barker, the FAA's public affairs director, who listened to the Ohio man with an unsettling sense of disbelief. There was an unsettling quality to the way David spoke to him that left him deeply disturbed. He sounded disturbingly rational, not at all like a conspiracy theorist or crackpot. His voice held no hysteria, just a profound exhaustion and an unsettling depth that teetered on the edge of desperation. But clearly, at that moment, what options did they truly have? David's dream was shrouded in dread, lacking any flight number or destination, only the haunting image of the plane, the catastrophic crash, and the terrifying explosion. Figures emerged sporadically in the dream, yet each one felt utterly incomprehensible. The FAA had no reason to believe a plane was in danger, yet they still chose to listen, a decision that loomed ominously over the situation. At the end of the conversation with David, Jack expressed his gratitude for the call, but ominously cautioned him that there was nothing they could do about it. So, after the phone call, David hung up, feeling a chilling void within him. He had done everything within his power, but an overwhelming sense of inadequacy loomed over him as if it would never suffice. Then, later that night, the nightmare returned. He woke up trembling, gazing into the abyss as he had done previously. Yet this time, An unsettling awareness gripped him. Time was slipping away. Then, on May 25th, everything changed in a way that left me utterly shaken. The dream unfolded as it always had, yet this time an unsettling weight of inevitability loomed over it. This would be the final moment. An unsettling certainty gripped him, though he couldn't explain why. The plane plummeted, engulfed in flames that consumed all, and then silence fell. David then opened his eyes, his gaze fixed on the ceiling, a sense of dread creeping over him. The suffocating fear that had consumed him for 10 nights straight had morphed into an even more oppressive weight. He sensed that a calamity loomed just around the corner. May 25th, 1979, unfolded like an ordinary day at Chicago's O'Hare International Airport. Yet an unsettling atmosphere lingered in the air. Travelers shuffled through terminals, business people rushed frantically to catch flights, and vacationers anxiously awaited their destinations. The air traffic controllers anxiously monitored their screens from the tower, tracking the chaotic movements of hundreds of aircraft as they departed and arrived, each moment fraught with tension. Among these planes was American Airlines Flight 191, a DC-10 destined for Los Angeles, a flight that would soon be etched in infamy. At 2:50 p.m., the passengers boarded, a mix of families, professionals, and book industry representatives, all heading towards the American Booksellers Association convention, an event that loomed with an unsettling anticipation. Captain Walter Lux, a seasoned pilot with over 22,000 flight hours, was at the helm, accompanied by a first officer and a flight engineer. All three of them were seasoned professionals, and yet there was an unsettling air that hinted this flight might spiral into something far from ordinary. At 3:02 p.m., Flight 191 lingered ominously at the end of the runway, receiving clearance for takeoff with an unsettling air of anticipation. The aircraft hurtled down the runway, gaining speed, but as it finally took to the skies, calamity unfolded. The left engine ripped free from the wing, soaring up and over the aircraft before crashing down onto the runway beneath. As the engine tore away with a terrifying force, numerous critical systems collapsed in chaos. Hydraulic lines were severed, leading to the left wing's slats retracting, and the outcome was nothing short of disastrous. El avión perdió inmediatamente la estabilidad, y el ala izquierda perdió sustentación. It then started to roll, and in mere seconds it achieved an unfathomable 112-degree bank. In the cockpit, the captain and his crew fought with a sense of dread to regain control, but the damage was beyond repair. The DC-10, barely reaching 350 feet, now hurtled downwards toward the ground. It breached the airport perimeter, hurtling into an abandoned airfield just beyond the runway, and the collision was immediate and catastrophic. At 3:03 p.m., Flight 191 crashed violently into the ground, erupting into a colossal fireball. The aircraft shattered upon impact, sending fragments flying across the field and into a nearby mobile home park. 2 trailers were obliterated by this, and tragically, 2 individuals on the ground perished. Emergency responders hurried to the scene, but tragically, there were no survivors. All 258 passengers and 13 crew members met a tragic fate in the inferno. The news of the crash spread like wildfire, sending shockwaves through the city. Chicago's emergency services found themselves inundated with frantic calls, while local hospitals prepared for a surge of survivors that would ultimately never materialize. Back in Ohio, David was at work when the phone rang, sending a chill down his spine. A trembling voice, in stark contrast, conveyed the news, and the words sent a chill through his entire being. What was once a mere figment of my imagination had now manifested into a chilling reality. He had witnessed it and endured it night after night, and yet he found himself utterly helpless to put an end to it. He then crumpled into his chair, overwhelmed with tears. Back at the FAA, Paul and Jack were utterly stunned. As the news reached their ears, a chilling realization washed over them. This was precisely what David had foreseen. The details were chilling. An American Airlines DC-10 rolling onto its side and crashing in a fiery explosion. In the days ahead, the investigation into the crash would uncover that neglecting proper maintenance procedures had resulted in a catastrophic structural failure, leading to the engine's horrifying detachment. However, for those who heeded David's warning, the technical explanation provided no solace whatsoever. He had desperately attempted to alert the world, yet no one seemed capable of taking action. The crash of Flight 191 stands as one of the most catastrophic and heartbreaking events in aviation history, claiming the lives of 273 individuals on that fateful day in 1979. However, David's unsettling premonitions are just the beginning of the chilling occurrences that envelop the flight. To begin with, Flight 191 was already steeped in a chilling history. To that point, aside from 3 flights, the number 191 between 1963 and 1972 had culminated in catastrophic crashes. Today, that number is a shocking 6, with the last occurrence haunting us in 2012. Now, this is seemingly insufficient to be statistically significant, yet it remains an unsettling coincidence. But if you look closer, you'll uncover that David wasn't the sole individual who got some sort of foreboding about the crash. Una mujer llamada Lindsay y su madre tenían boletos para el vuelo de 1979 y estaban esperando en la puerta a que comenzara el embarque. In a shocking and bewildering moment, Lindsay found herself engulfed by a vivid vision of a plane plummeting from the sky. And like David, she was not a so-called psychic who boasted about having the ability to glimpse into the future. She was merely an ordinary individual with a flight scheduled for that day, yet an overwhelming force seized her before boarding, compelling her to plead with her mother to change flights. In her case, the premonitions were a chilling twist of fate that ultimately saved their lives as they rebooked on a later flight. Another passenger on Flight 191 was an author named Judith, who was on her way to the booksellers' convention to promote her new book. At a certain moment in her narrative, Judith discloses that she cultivated an overwhelming dread of flying, stating that each time she needed to travel for work, her head would shake uncontrollably from the moment of takeoff until landing. This anecdote is found on a chilling page of her book, page 191. It is utterly shocking that Judith was among the 273 individuals who perished in the crash. Now, if you're familiar with the channel, you likely realize that there's never truly been anything eerie showcased on the channel. No creo que haya dicho explícitamente por qué, pero la razón es que a menudo, al profundizar en muchas de esas historias, es bastante obvio que hay explicaciones racionales. This situation is deeply unsettling, primarily because witnesses are infamously unreliable. It becomes incredibly challenging to address a topic when the events seem so distorted from their true nature. That being said, following the crash of Flight 191 in Chicago, there are unsettling reports that are quite peculiar, and they warrant mention, regardless of their authenticity. In the days and weeks following the crash, the field where the DC-10 had gone down was cleared of debris, but unsettling reports began to surface. Drivers passing by the site at night reported witnessing eerie bobbing lights hovering over the field, flickering like ghostly lanterns before disappearing into the darkness. Others recounted hearing unsettling sounds akin to faint cries, moans, and the eerie whine of an engine battling against the air, only to be succeeded by a ghostly explosion. Residents of the nearby mobile home park, situated just beyond the crash site, were also subjected to unsettling disturbances. Dogs that had always been calm suddenly erupted into frantic barking, their eyes locked onto the vacant airfield as if sensing an unseen threat. Some homeowners had been jolted from their sleep in the dead of night by frantic knocking on their doors, only to swing them open and discover an eerie emptiness beyond. Others have shared unsettling encounters with a disoriented man who appeared at their doorsteps, mumbling about needing to retrieve his luggage before disappearing into the darkness. Perhaps the most unsettling account emerged from a mobile homeowner who was out walking his dog near the site one night. He recounted the unsettling encounter with a young man who, in a state of panic, desperately sought the nearest telephone. But there was something deeply unsettling about him. The young figure reeked of fuel, and smoke appeared to billow from his clothing as though he had just emerged from a blazing inferno. The dog walker then turned to point toward a nearby payphone, but when he turned back, the man had vanished without a trace. Within the airport's confines, both travelers and employees have reportedly encountered an eerie figure lurking near the departure gate that was once associated with Flight 191. Numerous witnesses report a chilling encounter with a man at a payphone, only to watch in disbelief as he took a few steps and vanished without a trace. Regardless of whether these bizarre accounts were merely the creations of vivid imaginations or something far more sinister, they undeniably contribute to the unsettling atmosphere surrounding David and the other passengers. And as you might imagine, for David, the events of May 25, 1979 left an indelible mark on his existence, haunting him endlessly. He encountered an unspeakable reality that defied all logic. After the crash, the FAA handed over his notes on his testimony to the Institute of Parapsychology in Durham, North Carolina, with the hope that experts might shed light on his inexplicable visions, but they were left in utter disbelief. And ever since the 10th night of the reoccurring dream, David has been left in a state of unease, never to experience it again. Nor has he ever had any dreams that could compare to the chilling vividness and reality of his Flight 191 nightmares. If you've managed to reach this point, I can't express how grateful I am for your attention. If you wish to experience the audio-only version of these videos, you can tune in wherever you typically find your podcasts. Additionally, if you dare to share a story suggestion, you may submit it through the form located in the description. If you wish to support the channel, think about joining the Patreon or becoming a channel member right here on YouTube. Regardless, I appreciate it once more, and I dreadfully hope to encounter you in the next one.